get started because we're 4 minutes past the hour, and the others can join and catch up. So I just want to say welcome, everybody. It's great to see so many of you here. We are going to be recording the session as well, so those who miss out on the session, because it's a little early for some parts of Africa still. The time difference between Africa and Asia always makes it interesting to try and find a time that works for everybody. But thankfully, that's why we have the record button to be able to share the insights afterwards. I had the pleasure of meeting in person last month in Thailand, Raphael, who is going to be telling us a bit more about the journey of the Fintech Association of Hong Kong. Thank you so much for taking the time today with us.
Yeah, sure, my pleasure.
So we have an hour. I'm going to be starting off by kicking off and asking some of the questions, but obviously everybody on the call, if you have burning questions, please either raise your hand so that I can see you and can sort of interrupt the flow and bring you in, or you're welcome also to type them in the chat as well, so that we can make sure that the session gets to the knowledge and the nitty-gritty about how Fintech Association of Hong Kong works from your perspective as well. So maybe we just start, Raphael. I'm going to hand over to you to just tell us a little bit about when you formed, how you formed, just a little bit of background info to bring us up to speed to start off with.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Hello, everybody. I could tell by your reactions that you were saying good morning, that you are from a certain time zone that is not necessarily mine, as it is 5 p.m. my time here in Hong Kong. Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the Fintech Association was founded in 2017, and this came at the back of the fintech ecosystem burgeoning in 2016, I should say, with with fintech becoming more of a, I wouldn't say yet a household name, but it was at the forefront with digital with cross-border payment providers, the first data aggregators, the first companies that trying to be, to build up as pure digital banks or digital insurers, and of course the very first crypto hype that was happening here. And those of you who've been around at the time, this was the time 2016 where Hong Kong was actually the hotbed of crypto globally. And so in the back with that, with the tailwind of all of that, then a couple of guys who were influential at the time also ran the first ever Hong Kong FinTech Week at the end of 2016, which was a small first gathering, as what they thought, but it was such a booming success that then the government said, oh, maybe we need to take this FinTech thing a little bit more seriously. And maybe we, put some professional people around this from a conference planning point of view. And how about you guys that are so influential? Why don't you create kind of an association that caters to the fintech ecosystem and represents such, both within Hong Kong and externally and private side to the public side, or to the government and regulators. And then, as I said, at the back of that in 2017, we were formed as a limited company. So we are set up, we are a not-for-profit limited company. We're not an NGO. Yeah, we are a normal limited, so we pay corporate tax if you make a profit. We pay none of that if we make a loss. But we're a completely normally limited company, like many others in Hong Kong. But our mission is to be not for profit, which means revenue maximization is not our main goal. It's actually the value proposition we bring to the table, first and foremost, attempting to be cost covering, not necessarily to maximize revenues for us. Maybe I stop there for the beginning.
That's great. So from a very sort of humble, small beginnings, right the way through to where we are now, I think that'll be an inspiration for many of the people on the call are probably a bit more at the beginning of your journey, where you sort of started, rather than perhaps where you are right now. So you talked, I think, and it's an important point there. So it's a couple of questions I've got for you that are woven together, so you can sort of pick how you respond. But firstly, covering your costs and generating revenue is important. So what different revenue sources do you have to create that coverage? And
Yeah,
also,
absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, was there more to that
and then I
question?
was going to also say, you talked about member value proposition. So, sort of, what are some of the things that you bring to your members? What those? So, i.e., how do you use those funds?
Sure, absolutely. So on the revenue side, there's one important point which I have to say right away. We are a completely independent fintech association, which is also rare in Asia. From what I can tell, we are the only fintech association in Asia that is not government backed. Now, this is by design because when it was started, it was actually the government officials that said, we want you to be independent. We want you to be, you know, outspoken and tell us what the ecosystem thinks, we want you to be like that. So that was the initial idea, and that's how we started. And then to be fair, at the time I was not the general manager yet. I've only been the general manager for the last 2.5 years. So there were people before my time who have started everything, and but this is very key, I think, and we have kept that alive ever since. That we are absolutely non-dependent from any government fundings. That is easier to say for a place like Hong Kong, certainly than other places. So, I'm certainly for Africa but even in Asia, right? So, of course, the Vietnamese FinTech Association can't start off just like that. Neither can probably the Philippine FinTech Alliance, et cetera, et cetera. So, we are in a very unique position there to not have any government funding. It comes pros and cons with that, right? So the pros means that gives us massive independence in terms of what we do in our agenda and what we can say and do say. But it comes and then to the con side is that we are constantly having to figure out where we get our revenues from. So where do we get our revenues from? It is basically only two things. It is for now it is memberships, and we have memberships from corporates and individuals. Of course, the individuals pay less, and on the corporate side, we have certain tiers. Startups pay less than the SMEs, pay less than the banks and the law firms and the consultancies, et cetera, et cetera. And the other part is sponsorships. And sponsorships can come in multiple ways. This can be co-branded events or event series, or in person or in a hybrid way, but can also have different types of you know outlets. I would say it can be in a thought leadership topic, in a thought leadership article, or newsletters, sponsoring, etc., etc. So this is really our only income alleys we have and we live off. On the cost side, we keep it a quite tight lid on it. So whilst we have many people to do actually work for or contribute to the FinTech Association's activities, the the team on the payroll is only 4 people. So we have a lot of volunteers that, and I can dive into that a bit later, that do work for us on multiple levels. Um, and then for anything else, from a office space to uh, you know accountant to corporate secretary perspective, PR agency perspective, we strike barter agreements. And now, obviously, 7 years into it, we have a different standing than at 2017. In 2017, we were begging probably on our knees by somebody to help us out. And now we're obviously in a different situation because we can say, after all these years and all the activities we've been doing, that's it. Hey, do you want to be associated with us? So the negotiation narrative changes then quite into our favor after all these years. So that's that from a revenue and cost perspective. And then from a member value proposition, that is okay, that in itself is a little bit this comes in multiple shape and forms. Of course, why do people or companies join us? Is because they want to be affiliated in one shape or form with the fintech ecosystem in Hong Kong and or the Greater Bay Area, the south of China, in which we explore more and more. In general, why do companies and people join associations? And usually for three, four things. One is access, two is network, and three would be branding and exposure, I should say, and along those lines. And what we do is we provide all of this. We have built 8 subject matter expert streams that we call committees. I don't like the name particularly well, but a little more like practice areas fits better in all these categories that are important in the fintech ecosystem in Hong Kong. So this is from RegTech, InsurTech, big data and AI, Web3 blockchain, digital banking and payments, ESG green tech, and so on and so forth. And our members regularly meet in those communities or practice areas to share the latest news, drop off their questions in the ecosystem, chatter house rules. And we run about 50, 60 events a year across all these different subject matter expert streams. Sometimes in a webinar, very simple. Sometimes a little bit with more boo-ha and everything around. And then we have a few flagship events we do as well throughout the year. And also, we're not the only ones to do fintech in Hong Kong. This comes in different shapes or forms. We work together and run events together with the incubators and aggregator programs that we have in Hong Kong. We have 2 of those. We work together with universities. The chambers of commerces are always interested because a lot of the chambers of commerces also have a innovation stream or that they want to plug in with. And we work with everybody who where we see this can be a value proposition to that. So this is the part from a knowledge sharing and also a little bit branding or perspective. And then we do quite a bit of policy and advocacy work. And then here comes the independent part into play. So you can only do that, obviously. I mean, it depends a little bit, of course, on the government bodies and the regulators, how open they are. But it's going to be in Hong Kong, it would be difficult to be critical and honest with government bodies or with the regulators if we were not independent. And they really appreciate us. We have multiple regulators in our market. So one for banking, one for capital markets, and an insurance authority, and a few others. And they really like the fact that we are able to represent what the fintech ecosystem thinks, and we are candid in our responses too. Polite, but we clearly say what we feel like we need to say. And that is certainly a benefit we can provide to our members, particularly to the startups and SME members. They would not have the access to talk to a regulator, and they would get the voice heard through us. I think that's roughly it.
That's great. So, I mean, it's an impressive amount of work, but a relatively small, like head office, I suppose, team, 4 people. We've sort of heard from a few associations recently who've been joining this series, and they've got sort of 20 plus staff. So it's refreshing to hear that you can deliver things in a smaller team if you've got a strong association with some strong volunteers as well.
Correct.
Who are the kind of people that volunteer? Are they the members themselves
So
volunteer?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So they are all members. So maybe a little bit on the structure of the Hong Kong Association. So we have an executive team that I'm spearheading as a general manager. This is the team of 4. We are on the payroll, and we run the association operationally with everything. And then on top of us, there is a board of 11 people. These are also already pro bono. These are the faces of the franchise, so to say. They have the board has 3 roles. Firstly, to govern us. Secondly, to represent the fintech association to the media, to the regulators, etc., etc. And then their third role would be to also sponsor or like open doors, I should say, because this must be influential people in the Hong Kong fintech ecosystem, and this can be from people from banks, from insurances, but also from tech companies or law firms, uh, the whole nine yards. So it must be influential people in the ecosystem that can open doors where needed. Yeah, I would say that. So the this is the board, and then we have the I mentioned, you remember I mentioned we have these 8 subject matter expert streams, if from insurtech to regtech, digital banking, payments. These are always run by 2 people as co-chairs. So they are basically the hidden stars of our association because they drive actually most of the activities. And these are people who do this also on the side to their real job. So what they would do, for example, because I can't assess what are the latest greatest news and the most important topics in the insurtech world. I don't know, but they do. They know what is relevant. They bring in the speakers' ideas, and at one point, then they hand over to us and say, "Hey, we like to do this and that on that day. Can you create a banner? Can you take care of the promotion? Can you invite people, our community?" We also always open up to non-members to not make it too exclusive. We don't want to be exclusive. Um, and we always have non-members joining us as well. That's why also our brand is quite strong, I would say, in our market. And so if you extrapolate that, 8 times 2 is 16, plus 11 board members is 27. These are 27 people who don't get a single dollar for their activities. But all of them probably need to spend around 6 to 8 hours per month, I would say, roughly, to do work for us. Why do they do it? They are passionate. Certainly, they also get some personal branding out of it for sure. Um, and of course, once you are the lead of a certain stream in a place like Hong Kong, that can have some BD implications for you at one point, indirectly at least. Yeah. So, but it's interesting for me because think about it, right? I can't really chase those people. They don't get a single dollar. If it's putting their bosses on CC of an email doesn't help me. So I need it's a different way of operating than in a company. So I'm really depending on their goodwill and the time they allocate because I can't force them. And then therefore it's probably even more um sometimes impressive what we can actually get together with a passion and team spirit that we apply.
And I think a lot of people, Camilla and I were laughing there as well. I think we have 2 or 3 of our co-chairs of some of our working groups on the call with us today who volunteer their time. Without
Yeah,
volunteers, I don't think many associations could run.
100%. 100%.
And like you say, the people who with the knowledge are those often who own a fintech or work deeply in the
Yeah,
industry, who wouldn't really
correct.
want a full-time role in an association anyway. It wouldn't be best use of their skills. So trying to find that balance between the industry experts, but as you rightly say, you do need a few people to organize the event, to put things together, to advertise it, as Camilla very helpfully
Yeah,
done for us today. Nobody would be on the call right now. It would just be me and you having a chat again, Raphael, if Camilla hadn't done that hard work of bringing everyone together. So it's a mixture of all the different skills that you need, and it's really inspired. It certainly inspired me to know that this can work with volunteers. And I know many people on this call have been, there's names on this call that I've been working with since 2018 who've been volunteering their time at association. So it is very much a project of passion, but when you get the right people, it's phenomenal. But it is tough to manage and run with volunteers. It is a very, like you say, it's a very different kind of culture,
yeah.
and sort of maybe you could, I don't know, maybe you sort of, how do you kind of gently nudge and move things forward? What sort of top tips might you share with people about how do you keep that momentum going with such a large number of volunteers?
I think it's a very good question. So maybe I segue a little bit away of that because maybe the bigger question is how long do these people stay on in their role? So because they don't have a working contract with us whatsoever. It's literally, one day they could say I'm leaving Hong Kong or I'm on maternity leave or I'm doing, I have other reasons to not do it anymore. So this can always happen at any point in time, which why we always say, especially to these guys who run these subject matter expert streams, have your team of 5, 6 people around you where you can actually at the back share a little bit of work. So maybe a little point. So our articles of associations say that our board member can run a maximum term of 2 + 2 years, or 4 years on the board. Then they have to leave. Co-chairs running these different streams. We always we don't have it hard coded anywhere. But we usually say, after 2 years, why don't you give others a chance to do something? Sometimes, we have also co-chairs who've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and we're incredibly grateful because nobody else has been stepping up. Sometimes it is, but there's also other cases where there is a queue, behind until the end of the block, where they would team up and say, "Oh, I want to have this exposure to do this and that," especially in the AI and big data and AI space, or the Web3 and blockchain world right now. So we have to balance
Some
this out as
aspects are
well.
sexier than others, right? I'm sure there's not such a long queue
Yeah.
for reg tech.
No, in our case, yes, in Hong Kong, sure, because Hong Kong is a very strong RegTech market, but there's others, you're right, like, InsurTech or cloud and cybersecurity, a little bit is going to be less. But it really depends probably on the market and the current themes that are more relevant than others. So we try to also make sure that we change over in people, to not give the perception we run this like a dictatorship, or only few people have something to say in that, or have exposure to that. So I think this is the first key part. And then I think how to keep people on the ball. I think it starts with yourself, because everybody knows we are the team on the payroll. We are the one who operationally run it. When they see us also doing the work we're supposed to do, then it's easier for them to also commit. So, and likewise, when I see they trying to put a plan behind what they want to do throughout the year, if they make referrals to new members who could possibly join, I see they're also committed to it. So it's a mutual nurturing, yeah, symbiotic, relationship, almost, in the best way possible. Of course, there's sometimes cases where there's less to do, or there's less, as I was mentioning on, sometimes a person is leaving the country, or the maternity leaves or something, like, or a combination of both in one, and then you have to see how do you fill in the gap. And again, if people have a good feeling about the association, see, I see there's some value creation at the end of the day, people tend to flock and say, look, I'm happy to chime in for the next 5 months or for next 6 months. And after 6 months, they say, oh, I actually like it. It fits well. And I'm happy to do this another 12 months or so. But again, it still comes back to the entire point. You need to have the volunteers to do it, and it starts all on top of the house with the culture you're setting, and the community aspects you are living, as opposed to just being in that on paper and not having anything on the outcome side.
No, that's phenomenal. It resonates so much with a lot of the way that we've been trying to think as Alliance DFA, that the more active you are, the more you do genuinely bring value and opportunity
Yeah.
to the members, the more they are likely to step up and be part of that. And I think that's that value add. I mean, one of the working groups we have is, in fact, that Gerald on the call with us today runs, is about membership value. How do you make sure that both us as the body trying to sort of bring everyone together, how do we add value to our members who are on this call? And the number that are on this call, I think we've got about 12 or 13 different associations. At least 50% of our membership on the call will show some sort of value there. But also, I think it's important that we remember as the associations, what if you're sticking to your value proposition and adding that value, members will come and members will want to participate and be part of an association. And obviously your independent kind of nature is something that is incredibly important in your market. And I would say all of the members, majority of the members on this call, none of them have been funded by a regulator or government to get going. So they highly resonate with the independent nature that you've taken. And so I've sort of got a question that's sort of kind of related to that, I suppose, in that you've got a quite a wide variety. So you're called a fintech association, but I've heard you mention that individuals are members, banks are members, lawyers are members. What is your philosophy on that?
So we have the feeling everybody who feels or thinks he or she can be part of the fintech ecosystem can be part of, then we do it. So our entry barriers are very low from a from an adoption perspective. Um, and sometimes individuals, uni professors don't have a company; they have to join as individuals. We also have students to join, of course, on a highly discounted level. And also sometimes it's individuals joining because their company doesn't prove it, or this year doesn't have put the budget into place, or there was any screw up at the back. But they still want to be associated with it. We also allow offshore members, so members that are not sitting in Hong Kong, to be part of our member base. And with the only difference that they can't vote at the AGM. That's the only thing we have. You have to be a Hong Kong resident to be voting at an AGM of a Hong Kong company. The the so that's that. We have no, I mean, it's a natural thing. You will not get a, I don't know, a shipping company that would come out of nowhere and want to be part of our association. That's just not happened. The same, but for a restaurant or for a, whoever it is. So that's not happening. And even if maybe they join our events on like a monthly networking drinks or something, and then they would pay their fee there. But from a membership perspective, I think people tend to flock to what they feel comfortable with. The same applies, by the way, to our members who join us. So we have these 8 committees, and at the beginning, when the association started, we said, oh, you can only join 2 committees. And then I said, why do we do this? Because, Cloudflare will not want to be part of InsurTech, I'm very sure. Or PayPal it feels more naturally associated with digital banking and payments. So why don't we, and then again, if members join on the corporate side, they come with 5 to 10 people, why would we limit them? Why don't we let the CISO be part of the cloud and cybersecurity stream? Why don't we let the head of compliance be part of the RegTech stream and the BD people of the digital banking and payment stream? Why would we not allow that? And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. So people will flock to what they feel most comfortable with anyway. And even if not, if they want to learn something else on the side, even better. So, and that's how we operate. From a Then again, from a member's perspective, the only no-go area we would have is essentially journalists, just from a content picking perspective. So, for example, one of our members is Bloomberg, but so for them we had to really ensure that it is not the journalist side of it, but the data provider and capital market side that is part of our members. But otherwise, I don't recall a single case where we had to review it, dramatically at the application to join us. Hasn't happened for us here that we had to apply a strict stance.
That's great. I mean, at the end of the day, fintech covers a huge volume of things, and it's
Yeah.
great that actually the knowledge and sharing happens across the industry. We very much
Yeah.
advocate for having an open membership model, and I think I'm curious to know, do you have like a code of conduct or a code of ethics for members? Are you taking any steps towards
Yeah.
the route of self-regulatory organization?
Yes. So we have certainly some policies and procedures in place, and this is one of the actually the key things I have installed when I came in. Other than implementing a CRM tool and reviewing our service providers, et cetera, et cetera. So there's parts that we self-regulate ourselves, and there's parts where we ask the community to do them. So what do we do ourselves with? We have a very strong gender pledge in place. So simply said, no manels. So no panels, as in no manels. So we don't run events with 4 or 5 guys on stage, and neither do we support other conferences where such happens. So every conference that is not run by us, we make them sign off on our gender pledge. And we reserve the rights to pull our logo and support if we don't see that respected, which has, by the way, gathered some following of us in Hong Kong. So we were amongst the first that were very, very adamant of that. And we showcase that also on top of the house. Our board level on the board has more women than men. Not that we proactively designed that, or but it just happened to be. But it helps to put your money where your mouth is in a way. And then from our members' perspective, we have we communicate to our members, and beyond on LinkedIn and on newsletters and sometimes on EDMs. But our members communicate with each other on Slack. So we use the technology, the Slack channels. And for that, we have to always make sure we tell our members, please do not push your products, because we have over 1,000 members. If everybody pushes his or her product, everybody switches off after 2 days. So, and in 99% of the cases, that works well because nobody wants to see him or herself other product pushes every other day. So in that sense, luckily, except for some very, very minimal exceptions, it's kind of self-regulating in that way.
And how do you find it? Because I know we've been having this conversation. What medium do you use to have conversations? How do you
Yeah.
find Slack? Is that been successful for you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, so we changed that 2 years ago, and before that we were randomly on WhatsApp. So mind you, WhatsApp also has evolved with different sub-channels, etc. But at the time, they didn't have that. So we looked at Signal, we looked at Telegram, but Telegram is what the crypto world prefers a lot. But it became unmanageable with all these WhatsApp groups flocking left and right. And at one point, because the WhatsApp groups are not linked to your CRM tool of your member base. So at one point you have no control anymore who is in there, who's not. There might be people in there who haven't paid their membership for 3 years and they're just free riding on it. So there's no control over that. So we need to find a way to better control it. And the difference with Slack is not only that you have the different channels. It is also organized by email, not by phone number. WhatsApp is by phone number, and phone numbers can change more often than your work email, or your private email. So we have better grip by comparing who's on Slack with comparing that with our member base. Whereas there's no control over that in WhatsApp. There might be a number +44 +86. You never know who's behind that. So we used that as well, and it helped quite a lot because a lot of people were then, oh, I was surprised, I didn't know I wasn't paying my membership for 3 years. So okay, no problem, here you go. So that helped, but of course there is no perfect solution. Slack works very well with the startups, with the SMEs and tech people. It does not work a lot with a lot of traditional banks, big banks and insurances, because Slack very often is not an approved communication tool. So, but neither is WhatsApp, by the way. So but there's no perfect hit. But we felt at the time that Slack, and probably till today, is not the ideal solution, but the best of the options we've found for our part.
Yeah, we've been sort of having the same debates. What do we use? We currently have WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
It's easier for us. We're sort of member association, so there's less people. But I know that there are paid solutions out there that connect to CRMs and things like that. But again, it's something that you have to bear in mind that people, if you have to log on to too many different websites or
100%.
platforms, you lose people.
100%. 100%. So for us, it was more a cleanup. We all started on WhatsApp too. There's nothing wrong. It's just once you have over 1,000 members,
Yeah.
and then people in companies change too. We have no control over that. There's otherwise we would need to review that every 2-3 weeks. There's something happening. It becomes at one point unmanageable. But again, to your point, right? So Slack is not something we know. The law firms don't work on Slack. The Citibanks and HSBCs don't work on Slack. We know that. So we have to find multiple ways to then communicate sometimes. But again, as I said, right, we don't use the paid version. We use the non-paid version for Slack. If we were an NGO, you can actually use their pro version for free. But since we are normal limited, we don't have NGO status, we can't tap on that, by the way. So in case you have a different setup, that could be worth to look at. But yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Sort of that, there are very expensive membership-based, solutions that, Camilla and I both had a look at just on behalf of our members to think, how could these work? Is it worth collectively looking at them? But I think like everything has its pros and cons, and whether if you're running on a budget, especially some of the associations on this call are much smaller budgets, running something like WhatsApp or Slack is much more affordable. But like you say, you have to have emails, you have to have newsletters, you have to have social media. Just trying to reach your members in as multiple different channels and ways as possible, I suppose, is the best solution.
Yes, but without going on their nerves either. So because I think this is also a key point. So because we in my team, we live and breathe that every day. We don't always recognize the fact that these people might be part of other associations as well. And then at one point, I remember like 1.5 years ago, we looked at our EDM frequency and we realized they get an average 2.5 EDMs per week. Way too much. Way too much. What's the sense of sending out EDMs if they don't get read? If people get your EDM, like, oh, these guys again, delete, right? So it makes no sense. So frequency matters. Frequency matters. I would say that the key is to less frequency, but then with more punchy content. Also, newsletters that go over 14 times scrolling doesn't work either. Nobody reads that. Nobody reads that, right? So either high level with links. People will click on links if they like it, and that's fine. But you don't need to give them essays of newsletters just to showcase you have been active. People know that you're active, but keep it short and crisp. Because people look at this during your work hours. You work on something else, and then comes an email from or a notification from the FinTech Association. They must want to read that. You can't force them. There's nothing in there that will shape their destiny at work. So we must give an incentive for them to actually read this. And you don't do this by pestering them, 2-3 times a week, at least from our perspective.
Absolutely, there's a balance, isn't there, between sort of,
Yeah.
like you say, that communication, and also if you find the one email that you get every week really useful, when it pops into your inbox, it becomes a priority for you to look at. And I don't know how you, but one of the ways I think about it is sort of trying to think there's going to be maybe 10 things in there, and maybe one thing will be of interest and significant enough interest to keep that going.
Yeah.
That's sort of a good way to not everything will interest everyone all of the time.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, and again, I'm reminding everyone else listening in, if you've got any questions, pop your hand up or pop them in the chat. We'll come to you as we're getting closer towards the end. I think there's sort of one major question I'd like to hear from you that we haven't touched on yet. So what would you say, what impact do you think that, or would you be able to say that you've had on your market? What are some of the key things that you're proud of having achieved over the last couple of years?
I mean, we have clearly established ourselves as the super connector in fintech in Hong Kong. As so when I always say when I started 2.5 years ago to operationally run it, it feels like to me I run like a startup, because we're a small team, and I do everything except for brand building because everybody in Hong Kong already knows who we are. They might not know every inch in detail that we do, but I barely in these 2.5 years come across a meeting where people said, Fintech Association, no, I never heard of that. So so that is in that sense we have established ourselves clearly. Also because the government bodies and the regulators accept us as the voice of the fintech ecosystem because they've been seeing that we have been diligent, competent, and consistent. I think this creates trust. So we have in a position, not of course in the beginning, but by now we are in a situation where the regulators, reach out proactively to us for sometimes closed door meetings to say, hey, we'd like to understand, if we do this for the virtual asset space, what impact do you think this will have? How do we run stable coins versus central bank digital currencies, et cetera, et cetera? How do we help open banking to be a little bit more, give a nudge to everybody to embrace it a little bit more? So this this has happened over time, and I I'm very sure that not every other banking or financial market group does have that same standing as we have in this regard. So I think in this case, quite good. All the member base, I think all the not every fintech, of course. I mean, the question is, again, our member base is we don't say are you fintech or not. We assume you are a fintech or fintech interested when you join us. But we have pretty much all the relevant names in our community. And of course, there's also very specific other, and we're not the only ones, as I said, to do fintech in Hong Kong. There is also a RegTech association that pure looks at RegTech. Fine. There are, especially in Web3, there's a couple of Web3 Harbor and a few others are popping up here and there. They're very dedicated to one thing. And that's also fine with us. This is we're not in competition necessarily because we all have a similar goal, and that is to foster the ecosystem. Yeah. Some are more focused. We as FinTech Association, we have to play the entire width of the piano, so to say. Yeah. So we can't be choosy and say, oh, I do less tech and do more Web3, or I do less AI, big data AI content than digital banking and payment and so on. So that is a given. But I have to still say though that where the Hong Kong fintech ecosystem goes, we go. So with Hong Kong trying to double down on green tech and ESG and Web3 and blockchain, then of course that attracts certain companies, certain activities, and we follow suit. So we are not working against that. But we just have to make sure that everybody from every spectrum has a home in our association. And I think with 50, 60 events per year, connectivity in Hong Kong and outside Hong Kong with every other fintech association in the region, um, conferences and getting our people into conferences as speakers and preferred booth slots, et cetera, et cetera. I think we've had our fair share of impact. Plus the inaugural FinTech Week that we've organized that we're still shaping and designing from a content and speaker perspective. I think we've still have our impact felt.
Brilliant. There's a lot
Mm.
happening, a lot going on. I mean, even 50 to 60 events, when you sort of think about how the frequency of that over just
Yeah.
165 days of the year, that's a lot of things that are happening there.
Yeah, so I've never heard we do too little. But again, it's not our forte to say, oh, we want to do 70, 80, 90 events a year. That's not the point. But this comes to the community build. So in cloud and cybersecurity committee event attracts a different crowd than a digital banking and payment group. It's just that. And our be it in on webinar basis or in personal event uh can attract as little as 10 people to as much as 120 people. And that's fine. It's fine because sometimes the topic doesn't bolt with everybody. Sometimes it's a bad time of the day, or there's other things going on, or actually the weather is too nice, I'd rather go to the beach. So these things happen, or I'd rather go to the personal trainer sessions. Things happen, and that's totally fine. It's about giving options so that our members have choices. It's not about doing more and more and more. It's about as long as our members have choices what to do and how to fill and if they can learn something or get some exposure somewhere, then they are happy. And luckily, we have a relatively high retention rate on our members. And of course, startups less so because sometimes you never know if the startup has bigger problems than us sometimes, of course. But the higher you go in the membership tier, the stickier they are, luckily. So that helps. But this is another balance we need to strike, right? So because we can't be seen as the Banking Association of Hong Kong by preferring HSBC, Citibank, and JP Morgan. But we also can't we're not the startup association either, where we only do startup things. So again, it comes back to the balance, right? So that everybody, the ecosystem is felt that, yeah, there's law firms who have something to say, there's consultancies, there's VCs, there is the incubating program. So everybody has to have people need to feel that there's an ecosystem coming together as opposed to being preferential to some.
Mm. It is difficult, isn't it? Because,
Yeah,
you
very.
need some sort of financial stability, and often it's the bigger players that are involved a lot heavily in the sponsorship and obviously paying their fees,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a
Yeah,
challenge.
I'm not gonna no, absolutely. I'm not gonna lie. We can't do it without the big shots, and the big shots are the big banks or insurances, right? So I'll be very clear. They, as you say, they give you the confidence that you can probably operate for the next 12 months, and then everything else is a little bit add-on. But because we need this because we don't have government funding. This is why that's the beauty of government funding, because you know for sure at least you can operate, you know. You might not do exactly everything to the benefit of your members, and sometimes advocate policy responses is not wanted when you get government funding, and this is some places in Asia it's the case at least. But this is the challenge, so I can choose, to what problems do I want to face, but I'd rather face this problem than beat on the other side. And luckily our members see the same way. But yeah, we need one, two big events per year that are sponsored, and one, two, three elephants in the room that pay significantly more than others to keep this running. Luckily so far we've been having that, but it's a fragile little flower to that you need to take care of.
I don't think there's one easy business model choice when it comes to running an association. Whether you're chasing, membership and sponsorship, or government fees, or even if you go
Yeah,
to the development sector, who've been, we've obviously had benefits from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding. Everything has their pros and cons, and I think it's just understanding what that is.
yeah,
But Kagiso's got a great question. He was sort of asking, what is your revenue split? Your sort of percentages, to sort of,
yeah.
how does that work?
Yeah, so we have clearly, I mean, memberships is clearly the number one. I would say it's about 75%, and is membership, and the remaining 25% is then sponsorships. Yeah.
And that's
You
phenomenal, because that's way above the standard. I think, the average of industries is about 40% membership fees. So you can see the value that people are getting from your
yeah.
membership.
Okay. I didn't know that. Yeah, okay. Well, good to know.
Yeah, I did a little benchmark about, and it was generally all associations, not just in the digital finance sphere, but generally
Hmm.
40% is considered good. So where you are is much higher than. But I guess that's also the benefits of being in quite an established economy as well.
100%, 100%, 100%. Look, I mean, we are also part of an Asia FinTech Alliance, where 9 to 12 fintech associations in Asia have come together, where we try to see where we can run sessions of, best practice sharing in certain areas, or whenever there's a delegation going from one country to the other, that we weave them into our activities, or but we even have Nepal. There's a Nepalese fintech association. Of course, you need government funding. There's no other way to get started, right? There's no other way. People need to understand. Um, so, and then also the same thing comes from a content perspective. We know that, Singapore and us as a more mature market, we have, we tend to have more sophisticated content. And when it's a webinar, I open this up to the entire Asia FinTech Association. For the webinar, we don't care really, right? But if it's more a language barrier thing, right, than anything else, let's say, look, if you have a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams or whatever, or LinkedIn Live, we use LinkedIn Live quite a bit. This is quite helpful because that significantly expands our reach. Um, the we make this available to the lesser matured fintech ecosystems, I should say. And I think that's the role that Singapore and us play in this construct of Asia FinTech Alliance. And it's just the role.
That's great. And so I'm going to encourage everybody on the call to sort of follow your channel on LinkedIn as well, so they can also come to your events sometimes.
Yeah,
Africa
yeah.
and Asia have their similarities and differences. So for those who want to be involved, or just continue to understand what it is you're doing and the value that you're offering to your members, social media
Mhm.
can be a phenomenal way of just keeping in touch with that.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got a couple more minutes left before we close the session, so I'm just going to open up the floor and see if anybody else has any questions for Raphael. You can
There
pop your
were some on
hand
the
up,
chat. I think there were.
unmute yourself. We've got a couple of think we answered most of the, Mariam there was talking about
Yeah.
consistency for trust. I think that's really important. As you said, I think you put competent and consistent leads to trust. I think that was something that we will kind of quote you. We always do like a little summary of the event, and actually I think that was quite an important reminder that consistency and competence together creates trust.
I see one question from Inonge. Do you see
Yes.
work overlapping with that of the associations backed by government? Yeah, and that's not a bad thing, not at all. I mean, it would be actually weird if because that would mean we would go completely against the grain. This is, I mean, we try to be independent, not for the sake of bullying against the government, because in an ideal case, we always go hand in hand, right? So, sometimes sometimes it is, sometimes it's less so, but we're never actually completely contradictive. So and the rapport we've have with the government bodies is pretty good. So yeah, there is some overlap. Also sometimes in our policy responses, and that's not a bad thing either, because it just solidifies maybe also for the regulators or the government bodies that they're going sometimes in a certain direction. I can give you a counterexample, though. In Hong Kong, like in many other, in Africa too, a lot of jurisdictions look at CBDCs right now. Hong Kong started off to look at this well from a retail CBDC, I think 1.5 years ago. And we were so clearly against that. So we told the regulator, said this is a solution in search of a problem as opposed to a solution to a problem, because we are 7.5 million people only, all live together, not distributed over 15,000 islands, just basically over 2 islands. Everybody has multiple bank accounts, multiple payment options. It doesn't serve anybody in anything. And then, and the regulator came, told us, we agree what you say, but you were the only ones who said it so candidly. So, and that's also the benefit a little bit. It's what I mentioned in earlier. And we always said, look, if you look at this, look at it from a wholesale perspective. But nobody needs a retail Hong Kong dollar in Hong Kong. We have instant payments, we have everything, credit cards. Nobody's underbanked here. So for us, it doesn't serve. It might be in other jurisdictions for sure, but in our case, it doesn't serve anything. And that's what we say in polite ways, of course.
And I think that that honesty is what gives you credibility. It might be a difficult conversation the first time round, but sort of actually being credible with what you have to say and explaining your justification for why having that data and information is important.
It's important, and I think in these cases, I think also especially within facing of the regulators don't come to us for any revision of the AML counter-terrorist financing guidelines, right? That is standard. You have the Association of Banks. But when you look at virtual assets, stable coins, CBDCs, that's new to them too.
Yeah.
That's new to them too. So they are looking around saying they will never admit it, but they will also say, I actually don't know what we are probably doing here. So and that's why this is then easier. And then of course they look at the FinTech Association first and foremost, because the banks will not say anything useful on, not useful, but anything supportive when it comes to open banking necessarily. You will also know that the Hong Kong Association of Banks will never dare to say anything against the regulator, because they are regulated by them and we are not. So there is these are the dynamics you have to factor in, right? So when we engage with the regulators, it is for topics that are kind of a new finance. It's not old school. How to deal with client deposits, or money laundering guidelines reviews. That's not where you need FinTech Association for to contribute much.
And I think especially in this time, in this very digital age where technology is advancing so rapidly, being a regulator is actually not easy. And trying to sort of collectively take sort of responsibility for, what the markets need. That approach is going to be much more successful with where we are right now. I can see that Kagiso's got his hand up. So last question to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and great one, Raphael. I think for me, actually, you touched on it for a little bit regarding the role of the regulator, right? And also, as far as the new way of doing things, when you look at financial inclusion, but most importantly, financial literacy, right? Obviously, fintechs, they are the innovators, for lack of a better word. I see I have 1 minute left. And I just want to check with you, how do you work with educational institutions like
Yeah.
universities?
Yes.
From skills transfer point of view, what is the role
Yeah.
of your fintech?
Yeah.
Because we're doing the same in South Africa. I just want to get your view on
Yeah.
how do you collaborate with universities
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
education? Yeah, thank
Good,
you.
good question. Good question. And I promise I will answer for more than 1 minute, regardless of what the time says. So I think in general, we need to understand in Hong Kong, there is an extremely high level of financial understanding throughout society, I would say, right? So in general, that's the first thing. With the universities, it comes in different shapes or forms. And to be honest, with the universities, I try to build up a program with universities, but truth of the matter is that the universities have their very own pace of going about things. So we then realize, okay, we can't always wait for each and every university in Hong Kong to be on the same path. So we work with those who are right now are ready for it. It's a little bit opportunistic, but in no way discriminating about one versus the other. So for example, I give you an example. So there's a science and technology focused university in Hong Kong. They have a master program with fintech curriculum. We review that together with our professionals, together with the professors, on an ongoing basis. Yeah, so because the professors, of course, they have their more theoretic angle to it, but they might not always be. They almost might want to have a practitioner's view on certain things. So this can be from a viewer perspective. We also chime in if and when they say, "Oh, I have this in this session right now. We're having this in this project. It would be great if somebody from the fintech industry could come by and contribute to that too." So we hear from the founder or from from a startup or a smaller size company CEO about how this is actually put into practice. That's one way. There's another university in Hong Kong, PolyU, who runs regularly a fintech adoption survey throughout Hong Kong. We support them then with social media promotion. We tell our members, hey guys, can you also please, fill out the survey? So the more the merrier, the richer the database gets, et cetera, et cetera. This is for the greater good of fintech adoption in Hong Kong from a consumer perspective adoption. That's that. Um, we sometimes universities have their own events and they bring in speakers from abroad and then say, hey, it would be great if somebody, we have this person from abroad. It would be great if somebody from a practitioner can also speak at our event, so we have a holistic view on certain things. So these are examples where we work together with the universities. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think, universities work at a kind of a similar place to regulators in some ways, sort of very, it can take a little while for curriculums to be fully overhauled like it does regulations, but there's things that you can do that really helps move that forward quickly. And yeah, exciting to hear of all the different things that you do. We've run to the end of our time, though. I'm sure we could carry on talking about this forever, but Raphael, thank you so much for taking this hour and taking some time out of your evening to share with us your journey. I can see there's a number of people saying that they've really enjoyed the discussion. It's been really insightful and really helpful to them. So we really thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure. Great to meet you. And if there's any other questions or something, we can do this again in I don't know, in 1, 2, 3 months time, as you please, Sarah.
That would be phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And we really look forward to building a relationship with you and keeping in touch. Thank you very much. And thank you to
absolutely.
everyone who's joined today and asked great questions. Thanks, everybody.